In this video lecture, we will discuss about Introduction to Fermentation Economics. So, let's start with it. Aim of the fermentation industry is to produce the desired product, and whatever the product that industry has produced, that must be sold in the market to recover all the cost along with the desired profits. Good yield of the product is only a part of successful industry. Whatever the product, our product is successful on the basis of its scale in the market, and there should be the consistent demand of the product in the market. Industry must be developed economically viable fermentation process. For that, to develop such successful process, certain objectives that should be kept in mind are as follows. We will see what are the objectives that we have to keep in mind to develop economically viable fermentation process. We will see first thing, that is capital investment in the fermenter and its ancillary equipment should be the minimum. Whatever the capital investment that we are doing for the selecting the fermenter and along with its ancillary equipment, that should be the minimum cost, and the fermenter may be used in the range of fermentation process. Ancillary equipment that includes temperature probe, pH probes, heating, cooling jackets. Then there is the baffle, aeration, agitator, sparger. For air sterilization, we mainly used absolute fixed pore membrane filter, that is PTFE, that is polytetrafluoroethylene. For the air sterilizations, we mainly use, that is PTFE filter. Why we cannot use sterilization of air by the heating, but that has become more costlier. So for that we use, for the sterilization of air, we use PTFE. And already we know about that there is a temperature probe, pH probe. For the heating and cooling, there are the jackets is available. Then there for the aeration and agitation, there is the sparger is there. Second, that is raw material should be the cheap and efficiently utilizable. The raw material, whatever the raw material that we are selecting, should be the cheap and efficiently it should be utilized. It should be designed in such a way that raw material that just support the growth of microorganism than the accumulation of the product. Our raw material must be cheap and easily available. It should be easily sterilized and allow the more product accumulation. Some media cost is due to the one component of the raw material. We can also replace by alternative low cost raw material or low cost if it is possible, then only. Some media that require the pre-treatment. For example, starchy media must be converted into fermentable sugar, that is rich medium, by the pre-treatment with the amylase. Protein must be degraded by the proteolytic enzymes to release the amino acid for the yeast growth. If there is acid and alkali are required to adjust the pH of the media during the production process. If your media is rich in the protein component, that produce the foam and increase the chance of contamination. For that we use anti-foaming agents, we use mechanical foam breakers, we use ultimately which are the cost effective. So whatever the raw material that we are selecting, that should be the cheap and efficiently utilizable. Third, strain. Whatever the culture that we have selected, a high yielding strain of microorganism should be used. For that, mostly Isolation of industrially important strain is usually found from many sources by the screening, but screening cannot fulfill all the criteria. It become very time consuming and expensive. For that, mostly the strain that we are using in the industry, that is strain improved, we go for strain improvement, that is has all the criteria that our strain must be grow on the cheaper media, that our strain has better resistance to contamination, our isolate must be resistant to several antibiotics, that must produce the high amount of the product, and it also may resistance to the fast infections. So for that we use the strain improved, go for strain improvement. Strain improvement, that is ultimately it is a quite or very cost effective method, but the thing is that it has a several advantages, that it has provided stability, resistance to the phage, response to the dissolved oxygen, tolerance to the medium component, production of form, morphological form of organism. So these are the several advantages of using strain improved. Fourth thing, that is to save the labor. Automation should be used where if it is feasible. Save the labor, which means that whatever the cost that is given to the labor, not only to the labor, to the working staff, technical and non-technical or trained person, that whatever the cost, that is payment which is given to the working staff in this industry. For example, culture handling, inoculum, production, product recovery and purification, maintenance of the product sterility, packaging of the product, steam production, equipment maintenance and cleaning. This all are there are the several persons that handle all those things. So whatever payment that is given to those persons, if we are using automation, if it is feasible, then is ultimately that save the labor cost. To increase the production of product, maintain the cell in their active phase. To increase the production of product, maintain the cell in their active phase. This can be done by the fed batch system. Recovery and purification must be simple and rapid as possible. When we are going for recovery and for the purification, it must be so simple and as rapid as possible. Cost of the production is directly associated to its purity. It decides its future stand and long-term market value. Purity that decides its future stand and its market value. So it is very important. The product purity, it is very important. Those products, if it is applied for the human use, for example, antibiotic that is used for the treatment of disease in the human, that must be free of toxic. So purity level is very high and it is very cost effective method. Purification steps we mostly use, that is crystallization, ion exchange chromatography techniques, solvent extractions, that contribute overall cost. If there is the 1 lakh is the total cost of your product, then 80,000 cost is given to its recovery step and its purity step. So we can decide that purity and the recovery, it is a purification and the recovery step is very important. Effluent discharge, that must be minimum, which means that waste disposal. There are many sources through which waste is generated. For example, waste generated from the actual fermentation, waste from recovery process, waste from cleaning water, waste from cooling water, waste from various stages of the product recovery and purification. those waste must be before when we are discharging, that must be pre-treatment before discharging to avoid the biohazardous. There must be, we give some kind of pre-treatment to those waste before discharging to the different places or into the wherever we are discharging to avoid the biohazardous. Some waste contain important byproduct. For example, acetone butanol fermentation, in which there is the byproduct, that is riboflavin. So this is the valuable product which recover the fermentation cost. So we should take care of those things also. Sometimes the byproduct, it also has some good market value. So we cannot avoid those things too. So that also we have to keep in mind. Heat and power supply should be used efficiently. That should be the minimum power supply, or heating or the power supply should be there. Otherwise, ultimately it will cost the more and more cost. 10th, that is space requirement should be the minimum, but there should be some allowance for the expansion production capacity. This is what all about the fermentation economics. Fermentation economics, in that we have seen that the main aim of the fermentation industry is to produce the desired product, and whatever the product that has been produced, that should have the good market value. Then we have seen what are the things that we have to keep in mind while when we are doing for any kind of production. First, that we have seen, it should have the good market value. For that we have seen first thing, that is we have seen the first most important thing, that we have the ancillary equipment. Whatever the ancillary equipment should have the minimum cost, and the fermenter that we are selecting, that should be in the range of fermentation process. Then we have seen the raw material. Whatever the raw material that we are selecting, that should have the cheap and easily be available throughout the year. Then we have seen the whatever the strain that we are selecting, that should be of high yielding strain. Then to save the labor cost, whatever the cost that is given to the labor for handling various operational aspect, for that if there is the chances of that, if we go for automation, so if it is feasible, then we should go for automation machine. Then we have seen the recovery and purification. It is a very important, and it should be the simple and rapid as possible. And for the effluent discharge, that is the waste disposal, whatever the waste that we are generating from in the industry for the production, that should be the minimum. Heating and the power supply should be the efficiently. Space requirement, that should be the minimum. This is what all about the fermentation economics.